Welcome to D&D Backstory. This is the origin of Marianna Cross, human, Order of the Mutant Blood Hunter. Mariana can very faintly remember a time before she had been trained to hunt monsters, before she had been turned into a monster herself. She has long since lost her parents' names and faces to time and trauma, but she remembers their love. She will remember her baby sister, Mercy, who was chronically ill, though Mariana herself was too young to know why. The first healers to visit had been people from the surrounding townships and villages. They brought with them strong-smelling herbs and poultices, and their best intentions, but none were successful. When the supply of local healers had begun to thin, her parents cast the net even further, and the people pouring in to see Mercy grew even stranger. Holy people and druids armed with ornately carved staves and healing magic, practiced doctors and surgeons in clean coats poring over the toddler with strange shining instruments. In their desperation, her parents finally sent away for the organization that would alter their family's lives so irreparably. Mariana vividly remembers the day they arrived, a shining beacon of clarity in the haze of her memories. The knock at the door boomed throughout the quiet halls. Her father left the table silently to answer the door, a look of dread and guilt across his face. So distracted that he didn't notice Mariana following him. She stopped short of the foyer, peering around the corner to watch her father answer the door. Standing in the entryway were two men in dark gray coats, tall black hats, and dark riding glasses that seemed to reflect Mariana's troubled gaze. The taller of the two men had immediately engaged her father in conversation, his vocalizations deep and measured and registering in her memory as nothing more than a rumble of thunder in the distance. The smaller of the two men, though, had knelt and removed his gloves, baring his teeth in a smile, and beckoned to Mariana. She timidly approached the man and shook his hand, as she'd been taught to do. Mariana remembers how his cold, long fingers seemed to envelop her entire hand.
You must be the big sister, yes? Mariana. It is a lovely name for a lovely young lady. It is very nice to meet you. My name is Dr. Conrad Ergot, but you don't need to worry about remembering that. My partner and I come from a place called the Institute, and we are here to fix your sister. Isn't that exciting?
The actual taking of Mariana and her sister is entirely absent from her memories. Her memory skips straight to being at the Institute, strapped to a cot and attached to a strange tubed apparatus that was sucking her life's blood from her. Though this was preferable to what came next. The apparatus began pushing fluids into her body. She screamed and screamed until her vocal cords were swollen and strained and would produce no more sound. And not until well after she subsided into a dejected silence did anyone come to see her. The door opened slowly, and she distinctly remembers smelling the person standing there before they walked into view. A stringent burst of chemical haze that she would come to recognize as Dr. Ergot's scent while he was at work. As he approached, Mariana squirmed at the thought of what torture he might bring. What she got was sadly much worse. A cold hand tenderly brushed a strand of hair off her forehead before coming to rest on her shoulder.
It is good that you have stopped screaming, my lovely Mariana. Unbecoming for one of your station. Your sister Mercy is already en route to one of our more remote facilities to begin the process of fixing her. You do not need the same fixing, though. So instead, we have decided to keep you here. No fixing, no, but the improvements we're going to make. I hope you are proud, my dear Mariana. Starting today, you are a part of history. I, sadly, will not be able to remain with you, but I trust my colleagues, and I know they will do great things with you. Be well, my darling. I expect great things from you when next I visit.
He squeezed her shoulder once in something approximating a comforting gesture, and then he turned and left the room. As his chemical reek dissipated from the room, she was left with only the sound of her own ragged breathing. Mariana's thoughts turned to her baby sister. Where was Mercy? Was she being subjected to the same cruelty? Two emotions began crawling at her heart, warring for control, despair, and fury. Both would serve her well over the years in their own way. Most of the rest of her memories of the Institute blended seamlessly from one into the other, unbothered by the proper sequencing of time. Faintly glowing chemicals surged into her system, filling her veins with an icy fire that spread its agony down to her bones, while men in dark coats scrawled notes onto parchment. Scalpels and blades, first cutting delicately, then violently, as a man with a magnifying lens observed the twitching in her muscles and the rate at which they began stitching themselves back together, being thrown bodily into a pitch-black pit, her eyes glowing yellow, and being forced to tear the throats out of first rats, then starving dogs, then stranger enemies. She learned to use her blood as yet another weapon, spreading her burning hate in physical form and reaching out to the blood in the others to make them feel a fragment of her own pain. Her despair from the first day served her as a shield, her fury as a sword. Through the years, she made sure her captives never suspected the truth, that she was learning to control her heart rate and fear responses, and that under the veneer of a terrified girl lurked a calculating predator with a cold desire to escape and a burning hatred for the men who had done this to her. She grew tall and strong. She was trained with the blade and the crossbow. She honed her senses to the point where she could identify by scent specific changes in the mutagen formulas she was made to consume. She bided her time for years, let them turn her into a proper monster and grow complacent with her. And when she finally saw her chance, she carved a gruesome path through the Institute in search of information on Dr. Conrad Urget's whereabouts. When she had the information she needed and had properly slain the entire crew at the facility, she emerged into the world drenched in gore. The young, terrified girl who entered the Institute had been fully replaced by a powerful, scarred huntress. She had not stopped to mourn, though, nor to celebrate her new won freedom. Mariana simply got to work. Mariana stands outside a thick oaken door.
Just open the door and come quietly, Doc. I know you're down there. I can smell you. Save us both some time and energy, would you?
Marianna Cross takes a deep breath, focusing her perception towards the sealed door before her. Through the door, she hears only the occasional indiscriminate rustle. Her nose, though, serves her a bit better. She can smell her quarry, Dr. Conrad Urget. The tang of his panicked sweat, intermingled with the noxious chemical sting of the potions he employs in his craft. She can smell damp stone and the rich, earthy complexity of various species of fungi and lichen. And over it all, nearly threatening to overwhelm her finely tuned senses, she smells death, heavy, coppery, and reeking. A brief, methodical inspection of her kit reassures her that her quiver and ammunition pouches are all intact, as are the various blades and stakes she keeps distributed and hidden about her person. She triple-checks the fastenings of her long, armored black coat and sweeps the length of it back behind her, securing it at her hips to ensure her legs remain unrestricted. From a specialized pouch on her thigh, she carefully extracts a slender vial containing a faintly luminescent clear liquid. She uncaps the vial and carefully applies it to the heads of some 15 crossbolts, one drop at a time, saving the final few drops for the blade of the short sword sheathed in her right boot. She places the empty vessel back in its pouch, then brandishes a second vial, this one containing a viscous, evil-smelling green liquid. Mariana uncorks it, grimaces faintly, and knocks the contents back in a single large swallow, closing her eyes and then sealing her hip pouch with a sure, steady hand. She shudders once, faintly, and when she opens her eyes again, they gleam a vibrant, predatory yellow.
Last chance, Doc!
She draws the crossbow from her back and pulls a dark, heavy bolt from yet another specialized pouch.
I'm already pissed off! You do not want me to have to come drag you out!
She sets the butt of the weapon into her shoulder, holding it in a low, ready position and breathing deeply. She could probably pick the lock, but she had long since given up the element of surprise, and this way made for a much more satisfactory entrance. Without taking her eyes from the door, she presses her thumb into a sharp barb set into the body of her crossbow. Blood immediately begins to flow from the wound, pooling in a small reservoir and running down 2 slender grooves alongside the body of the weapon, traveling determinedly down towards the tip of the crossbow.
I'm gonna give you to the count of 10, Conrad, and then I'm coming down there. 1!
Her blood reaches the end of its course, and at the place where the 2 streams of ichor meet, a pale blue flame suddenly leaps into existence, flickering steadily at the very tip of her weapon.
2!
She raises the heavy crossbow to her shoulder and levers off 2 oversized bolts into the door, splintering the wood and piercing into the hinges, their wrought iron distorting under the magical flames. She takes a beat to transition to the holy water-treated bolts at her hip. She pivots and slams her booted heel into the center of the door, sending it crashing down onto the rough-hewn stone behind it.
10!
She strides forward into the tunnel with a murderous intent, her faintly glowing eyes peering easily through the darkness before her. Cautiously maneuvering her way through, she rounds a corner and finds herself staring into a body pit. The pit is 15 feet in diameter and seemingly at least 15 feet deep. Packed near the brim with stripped, mutilated corpses. Most of the corpses are missing multiple limbs or facial features, though many of those are scattered loosely throughout the pit. Some appear to have their chest cavities opened and bones or organs removed. All of them, she notices quickly, are relatively advanced into their decomposition. Even those at the top of the pile are beginning to show thorough signs of rot. She circles around the perimeter warily, her crossbow held high and primed, advancing further into the underground complex. As she strides into the next chamber, her eyes take in the gleaming rows of surgical equipment and vats of chemicals lining the new room.
I know you're in here, Ergot. You big fucking nerd. Where's my goddamn sister?
A dull, squelching roar begins to sound from behind her, and as she turns swiftly and levels her crossbow, she groans in exasperation. The top layer of corpses have been flung away to the sides of the pit, and the remains of the pile are swaying back and forth in a towering stack. Decomposing mouths chomping mindlessly at the air, dozens of limbs flailing wildly, scattering gore across the walls and ceiling.
Conrad, you bastard!
And then suddenly she is overtaken, as the corpse creature surges forward, smothering her under its weight and tearing at her from every direction. Pinned against the wall, Mariana can feel the point of one of her crossbow bolts digging a furrow into her chest, impaled through one of the many arms of the creature still attempting to rip her apart and incorporate her pieces into its own monstrous form. She has not taken a breath, refusing to allow the creature into her mouth and lungs. She bares her teeth in a grimace, and finally her right hand finds what she's been inching towards. She gathers all her might and wrenches upwards with a short sword sheathed in her boot, the holy water on its edge rendering each piece of the monster that it touched inert and lifeless. The creature pulls back ever so slightly, but that is all the space she needs. She turns the blade about and thrusts forward, carving a hole into the center of the creature. The blade clatters to the ground as she instead brings the heavy crossbow to bear and levers off bolt after bolt into what could be called the heart of the monstrosity. It stops its writhing towards her. As Mariana continues to launch bolts into its core, the mass of corpses backs into a wall, shuddering violently. Then it ceased to move entirely, until collapsing to the ground in a slurry of disconnected body parts and cold bile. Mariana stands in the darkness, panting, and bends down to retrieve her sword. Only 9 bolts left. Not bad.
Quite disappointing, really.
Before Dr. Conrad Ergot even finishes his sentence, Mariana whirls around and fires her weapon, her bolt taking the doctor under his sternum and pinning him to the wall. She strides forward.
What the hell was that, Conrad?
Zombie clot. A new collaboration between myself and one of our necromancers. Should not have fallen so quickly to your weapons. Still needs work. And holy water? Really, Mariana? I taught you better than that.
She draws a stake and impales it through his left shoulder, then pivots and drives her heel into his kneecap, relishing in the sensation of it shattering under her boot. She watches silently for a moment as the cruel doctor's weight is taken up by the bolt and stake pinning him in place, then crouches slightly and brings herself nose to nose with him.
Where is she?
The doctor groans and coughs up a spray of dark blood, still grinning horribly.
She's dead, Mariana. She expired some time ago.
She wrenches violently up on the crossbow bolt, tearing a ragged hole in his chest.
Wrong answer, scumbag. I know when I'm being lied to. You made damn sure of that.
And yet I told no untruths, my darling, my beautiful Mariana. She has been dead for years, but...
He tilts his head upwards to meet her gaze.
My line of work has taught us both that death is not always the end, no? She's still out there, Mariana. Her heart still beats, but the blood in her veins is cold and congealed. You were our human monster, my dear, but she is our pride and joy, our living dead girl.
The rest of his sentence is lost in a spray of blood and shattered teeth as Mariana drives the butt of her crossbow into his smirking lips.
You fight a losing battle, Mariana. You cannot stop the march of progress. The Institute will never fall, no matter your efforts.
You might be right, Conrad. But there's only one way to find out.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Links to all of our characters' character sheets, our other character breakdowns, and all of our backstories can be found in the description below. Make sure you subscribe so you keep up to date as we release more and more characters and new content for you. And if you'd like to support us even further, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description below.